السلام عليكم. دي المحاضرة الثانية مع بعض بإذن الله تعالى إلى أن تنتهي الأزمة على خير بإذن الله. Our course about advanced cost accounting. Our first part, don't forget about standard costing, how to control manufacturing costs. In previous lectures, I explained how to analyze direct material variances and direct labor. And today, Bismillah, I will complete speaking about standard costing. The third part of standard costing variance analysis is manufacturing overhead variance analysis. Again, in previous, I speak about direct material, direct labor. We don't have any problem for direct costs because I can determine the cost per unit. I have the ability to trace the cost per unit. But here I have a problem for manufacturing overhead. Firstly, do you remember examples of manufacturing overhead? Any cost for manufacturing except direct material and direct labor, we say overhead. Like rent, insurance, depreciation, and direct material and direct labor. We have a problem for manufacturing overhead. My problem, I can't determine cost per unit because I don't have relationship between these items of costs and the unit. So we will use budgets, if you remember in previous year, cost accounting principles or managerial accounting principles, how to prepare budget. What I mean by budget, we prepare the budget for manufacturing overhead. We have two kinds of budget. It's not my problem today is to speak in details about budgets. I have static budget and flexible budget. When I speak about static budget, means I estimate manufacturing overhead for only one level of activity. But flexible, I will estimate my costs for many levels of activities. For controlling, flexible budget is more benefit than static budget when I speak about control. Again, what are the kinds of manufacturing overhead? I will speak about indirect material, indirect labor, rent, insurance, depreciation, etc. So we can classify the manufacturing overhead into two parts: variable and fixed costs. Again, variable and fixed costs. But when I speak about direct material, direct labor, all of them variable. Any direct cost in accounting will be variable. But here we have two kinds of costs. So we have to divide the analysis of variances for manufacturing overhead into two parts. The first one, what is a variance related to variable overhead or variable manufacturing overhead, what I mean. And what is a part of variance related to fixed overhead. So my lecture today will be divided into two parts. How can you analyze the variance of variable overhead, and then how can you analyze the variance of fixed overhead? The first part of my lecture today, Bismillah, will be about variable manufacturing overhead variance analysis. Don't forget. Again, don't forget, I told you, because I don't have a relationship between me as manufacturing overhead and the unit, I will use budgets. Budgets for overhead according to hours. Maybe direct labor hours, if I am in intensive labor industry, we can use direct labor hours to prepare our budget, or machines hours. if I speak about intensive automation industry. It depends on the decision of management. They will use to prepare the budget. They will use direct labor or machine hours. But both of them, I speak about hours. Again, hours, direct labor or machine hours. So the base of preparing the budgets here is hours. Do you remember in previous lectures? For direct material, I use quantity and price. For direct labor, I use hours. Again, and rate. Hours in direct labor, hours in budgets. So keep in your mind, when I prepare and analyze the variance of manufacturing overhead, I can use what? Performance report, okay, nothing new. Equations, nothing new. For variable overhead, it will look like the direct labor variance analysis. Again, direct labor variance analysis. So, again, if you remember with me, direct material, quantity, and price. What is the difference between direct material and direct labor? Direct labor, instead of quantity for direct material, we say efficiency or hours. Price for direct material, we say rate for direct labor. What about variable overhead? My variances are two. Again, my variances are two. The first one, efficiency variance, like efficiency variance of direct labor. Efficiency variance is the difference between actual hours and standard hours. Again, actual hours and standard hours. Regardless, the base of the budget. I mean, actual hours, actual direct labor hours, or actual machine hours, and standard hours, or standard hours allowed for actual production, if you remember. And in quantity, price, in efficiency, rate, in direct labor, I mean. What about the second kind of variance for manufacturing overhead, or variable manufacturing? We don't say price like direct material. We don't say rate like direct labor, but we say spending variance. I mean, spending variance. And the spending variance here is the difference between actual rate and standard rate. So, if you know direct labor variance analysis, what is the difference between direct labor and variable overhead? Again, we have efficiency variance in direct labor. We have also efficiency variance for variable manufacturing overhead. The same way to calculate. I mean, the same way. I mean, the difference between actual hours and standard hours. In direct labor, we have rate. The difference between actual rate and standard rate. Here also, we don't say rate variance, but we say spending variance. So, we will change the names and how to calculate the variances if I speak about direct material and direct labor. But 95% I will use the same way to calculate variances in manufacturing overhead like direct labor. Okay? So you have to know everything about direct labor variance analysis before speaking about how to analyze the variable manufacturing overhead variance analysis. How to analyze the variable? Here I will concentrate only on using two-way, only two-way. You know, in two-way, I can prepare performance report or I can prepare equations. The same. Again, performance report like direct labor. And equations like. The difference, instead of we say in direct labor rate variance, we say here spending variance. Do you remember me when I speak about performance report in direct labor. I change only direct labor here and I put variable manufacturing overhead. Do you remember how to prepare performance report? I told you I will imagine that I have 3 parts in my page. 3 parts. The first one, actual cost. Actual cost for direct material, actual quantity times actual price. Actual cost for direct labor, again, actual hours, actual rate. Here also, in manufacturing overhead, variable, I mean variable manufacturing overhead, I speak about actual hours, actual rate, like direct labor. But here I speak about actual rate for variable manufacturing overhead. The third one, do you remember? Third one? You can remember the equation of calculating the variance, the key equation, actual cost minus standard cost. Here I have actual cost. What about here? It will be standard cost. Standard cost. How to calculate standard cost? Standard cost allowed for actual production times standard rate for variable manufacturing overhead. Again, if I compare between actual cost and standard cost, the difference between them, don't forget, will equal total variance. Again for the third time, the total variance is the difference between actual cost and standard cost. I want to analyze the reasons of the total variance of variable manufacturing overhead. What are the reasons? I know we have 2 reasons. One of them we say efficiency, and the second spending. How can you analyze this total between how much is the efficiency variance and how much is the spending variance here? Do you remember, like direct material, right, direct labor? Here I will take actual hours from actual cost and standard rate from standard cost here. So this is a form of performance report for the third time. Actual, 100% actual, standard, 100% standard, and in the middle I speak about actual hours and standard rate. Actual hours, the same. So there is no difference in these amounts related to the difference in hours. But rates, the difference between rates, in direct labor we say rate variance, but the difference between rates in variable manufacturing overhead we say spending variance. Again, spending variance, don't say rate. This part in performance report speak about money. Again, money. In direct labor, this part, price variance. In direct material, this part will be price variance. In direct labor will be rate variance. For variable manufacturing overhead, we say spending, rate, price. The second part here, I have the same standard rate, but the difference between hours. The difference between hours, we say efficiency. Regardless, I speak about direct labor variance analysis or variable manufacturing overhead variance analysis also. The difference between hours will be efficiency. Don't forget, I explain why I have total variance. So the total of spending and efficiency variances must equal total variance. Okay? This, how to prepare performance report. It looks like 100% direct labor. If I change spending to rate, I will get the form, not the amounts, but the form of performance report to analyze the variances of direct labor. Okay? Very simple. How to calculate it? From my point of view, it is not a problem for you to remember the performance report or equations, but your problem will be how to calculate the costs, how to calculate actual cost, how to calculate standard cost, and then how to calculate spending and variance efficiency variances, etc. for direct costs and for overhead. Let me explain firstly how to prepare performance report. Don't forget, my first part of my lecture today is variable manufacturing overhead. Variable manufacturing overhead, I will use performance report and equation to analyze the variance of variable manufacturing overhead. I began with performance report. After finishing performance report, I will explain بإذن the equations. Very simple. Again, very simple. Your problem in manufacturing overhead, regardless I speak about variable or fixed, is how to calculate. In direct costs, I speak about material and labor, it's very simple. Why? Because I have standard per unit. I can determine quantity per unit, standard hours per unit. But here I don't have per unit because I speak about budget. So here I have the amounts not for unit, but it's budget. The following are the standard data and the actual data for department as a expected level of activity, which is 100%. This activity, 100% of the capacity. Okay, there is no problem if I speak about these amounts for 100%. But maybe you have a problem if my capacity not 100%, I will explain them in next lectures. But let me assume today the very simple case that my capacity is 100%. Where the capacity is measured by direct labor hours. That's very simple. I told you I will measure my capacity or prepare my budget using direct labor or machine hours in difference. Okay? But if I use direct labor hours, I can use the standard hours allowed when I calculate the variances of direct labor. Again, when I calculate the variances related to manufacturing overhead. But if I prepare my budget using machine hours, here I have a problem because I have to calculate the standard hours allowed using machine hours, not using direct labor hours like in direct labor variance analysis. Maybe I explain this in future, or I suppose that I will use direct labor hours to simplify my calculations if I speak about one company. And how can you calculate the variances and analyze the variances of the company? I mean, in the same problem, you have to know how to calculate the variances of direct material and direct labor and overhead for only one, for the entire company. I mean. Okay, this is my standard, my budget or standard here. Planned production units. 1,200 here, units. Standard level of activity. Not per unit, but for activity here. 30,000 direct labor hours. If you remember in previous lecture, I told you I have 1.2 hours per unit. But here I don't speak about how many hours per unit. I speak about here I have my activity. If my production is 120 units, it needs 30,000 direct labor hours. Budget, variable overhead, 75. If my production is and my hours are, so my variable overhead will equal 75. And fixed overhead will be 90. My budget here, separate between how much is planned or budget or standard, variable overhead and fixed overhead. So I told you, I will analyze each one separately. I began with the first one, variable overhead. This is standard, and this might actually happen during the month or during the period, I mean. Okay, my plan and my actual production units, 100,000. These amounts, again, don't forget, these amounts related to the budget. If here I have if my units are, my standard, my hours will be, and this my costs. What happened actually? This is what happened actually. My production, not as planned here, but my actual is only 100,000. My actual level, 26. Don't speak about, here I have 30,000 standard hours, here I have 26, so my actual is less than, no. That's a very big mistake. This 30 related to the budget units. 30 if my production is 120, but actually I have 100 units here, and this my actual for this. But this is standard for 120. My actual variable overhead and my actual fixed overhead. These my amounts actually and my standards. Here I ask you two requirements. The first one, analyze the variances of variable using performance report. I will repeat the same requirement. Analyze the variances using equations and analyze the variances of fixed. The same problem. I will use the same information to analyze both of variable and fixed. I will begin with variable overhead. Do you remember me? I know how to prepare performance report. I need actual cost, standard cost, and in the middle I need actual hours, standard rate. So I need actual hours, actual rate, again actual hours, actual rate, standard hours, standard rate. The first step, I told you the first step is to calculate your amounts firstly, your costs firstly. Regardless, you speak about direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. I don't have any problem. Again, I don't have any problem or little bit problem if I speak about direct material and direct labor. But here you have to know how to calculate. From my point of view, manufacturing overhead, the problem of it is how to calculate the amounts, not how to prepare performance report or equation. I told you like direct labor. This is my table. I need what? Actual hours. I need actual rate. Actual hour times actual rate, I will get actual cost. Standard hours allowed, don't forget allowed for actual production. Standard rate for variable overhead, again for variable overhead, I will get standard cost. If I have these amounts, it's very simple for me to prepare performance report, to prepare equations. There is no problem. From my point of view, my lecture today is to explain, is not to explain the performance report or equations for variable, but how to calculate. This is my problem. Again, this is my problem. This is my standard and my actual data. How to calculate your actual data? Very simple. I need what? Actual hours. Actual level. Actual level of activity. Here, direct labor hours. Actually, 26,000. 26,000. Again, I need actual hours given here. Actual hours is given. Okay. I need actual rate. This is my actual. There is no actual rate. Again, there is no actual rate. per hour I mean. But I have actual cost. Don't forget, I speak about the variable. I explain variable firstly. Actual variable overhead. Actual cost of variable overhead. This is my actual. 54,600. Again, 50 is given. I have the actual cost and actual hours, so I can get actual rate. I will divide actual cost by actual hours to get actual rate. My problem, not for actual. This, my actual is given. Actual amounts are given here. My problem here, standard hours allowed, standard rate, and standard cost. Do you remember how to calculate standard hours allowed? This is my equation to calculate standard hours allowed. My actual production units times what? Standard hours per unit. This is my equation. I don't change anything in this equation. Actual production units. Actual, here I have actual. Actual production units. It's given. 100,000 units. 100,000. So here I have 100,000. Times what? Standard hours per unit. Standard hours per unit. Here I have a standard or budget. I don't have per unit. Again, I don't have per unit. In direct labor, if you remember in my previous examples, I have standard hours per unit. But here I don't have. I have budget. So I have to use the amounts of budget to calculate standard hours per unit. Again, your first problem here, your first problem is how to calculate standard hours allowed. Standard hours allowed, mainly the equation is actual production units. Here I have actual production units. Again, actual, I will go to the actual side. Standard, I will go to the standard side. In actual side, I have actual production units. Here I have actual production units. What about standard hours? I don't have standard hours per unit. Here. So you have to concentrate here. You have to concentrate on that. How to use the standard data for the level of activity, for the budget I mean, to determine standard hours only per unit. Per unit. Don't forget, I need actual production units. This is actual production unit times what? Standard hours per unit. Here I have actual production. How can you calculate standard hours per unit? Read with me again the standard. Here, planned production units, estimated production units. Our plan is to produce 120,000 units. If I produce 120,000, my direct labor hours will be 30. So, if my production is 120, my hours will be 30. So I can determine the standard per unit or not. I can determine, and very simple. How can you calculate standard per unit? This is my equation. Again, this is my equation. Standard hours per unit will equal budgeted hours. I mean the hours according to the budget. Divided by budgeted units. Again, budgeted units. Here I have budgeted hours 30,000 and budgeted units 1,020 units. So I can say the standard hours per unit will equal what? Will equal 30,000. And I have here 120 units. I can get the standard hours per unit will equal 0.25 hours per unit. Again, your problem is when you calculate the costs firstly, actual and standard. In previous lectures, there is no problem for standard hours for direct labor. But here, we have a problem for standard hours because I have to calculate. How to calculate? Actual production units, it's given. But how to calculate standard hours per unit? Using the budget. We have equation to calculate standard hours per unit. It will not be given. I can give you directly if I speak about direct labor, because I can determine for direct labor the standard hours per unit. But here I speak about budget for manufacturing overhead. Okay? I have actual production units, 100 units. And I calculate standard hours per unit. So I can calculate standard hours allowed. Standard hours allowed will equal what? Will equal my actual production, here my actual production, and my standard hours per unit, not given, but will be calculated using this equation. After calculating the standard hours per unit, and I have already actual production, I can say I have standard hours allowed. Go back to my table if you remember. This is my table. Again, this is my table. I have actual data. And I calculate using the equation, calculate what? The standard hours allowed. Don't forget how to calculate the standard hours allowed. Not given standard hours per unit. Not given. But you have to calculate. The second problem in my preparing and calculating the costs, standard rate. Standard rate per hour. How to calculate standard rate per hour? Here I don't have anything per hour or per unit. I speak about budget. A second problem. How to calculate, which is given when I speak about direct labor. And direct labor, I give you standard hours per unit. Standard rate per hour. But in budgets, you have to calculate. You have to calculate standard hours per unit and standard rate per hour. And how to calculate standard rate per hour? I speak about, don't forget, variable. Here I have standard. When I speak about standard, go to standard. Calculate using standards. Okay? Standard rate. I need variable. Here I have my variable overhead estimated here. Or standard, I mean, or budgeted. 75. This amount, I need to calculate standard rate per hour. Per hour. How many hours here for the budget? This my hours, not units. I don't calculate the rate per unit. I calculate the rate per hour. Regardless, I speak about manufacturing overhead or direct labor. I use hours. So when you calculate hours times rate of hours. How to calculate rate of hours? Here I have equation also. Here I have equation. Budgeted variable overhead cost divided by budgeted hours. Here I have the cost and I have the hours. Again, my cost, variable cost, again, variable cost here, 75. And my hours, 30. So 75 and the hour 30, I will get 2.5. It's the rate per hour again, rate per hour. It's a rate per hour. Calculated. Again, you have a problem in calculating standard hours allowed. You have another problem in calculating standard rate. If I have standard hours, standard rate, I can get standard cost is very simple. 25 times 2.5 will equal this amount. If I have correct amounts, actually and standardly, I can prepare performance report, and I can prepare also equations. There is no problem. Do you remember? This is my table. My requirement is to prepare performance report. How to prepare performance report? Do you remember me? How to prepare performance report? I need what? How to prepare performance report for variable manufacturing overhead. I need what? Actual hours. And here I need standard hours. Again, if you remember me, 25, 2.5, it's standard. 26, 2.1 actual. Again, 26, 2.1, it's actual cost. Here I have pure standard. Everything is standard here. Standard hour, standard rate. And in the middle, don't forget, I need what? I need actual hours. Here I have actual hours times what? Yes, standard rate. Standard rate. The difference between 1 and 2, don't forget. Firstly, what is the name? Secondly, how much is the amount and its sign. The name for variable overhead, we say spending variance. We don't say rate variance. We say spending variance. How much? Subtract. Yes. 54,600 minus. Again, 54,600 minus. Here minus. 65. The difference is negative. Negative 10,400. Negative, it means in accounting favorable. Favorable, its sign will be F. The difference between 2 and 3, yes, efficiency variance, like direct labor. The same name, the same calculation. Here, 65 minus 62,500, 65 more than sold, the difference is positive. Positive 2,500, positive, unfavorable in accounting. One of them is favorable and the second unfavorable, no problem with me. Maybe both of them favorable, both of them unfavorable, or one like our problem here. The difference between 1 and 3, don't forget, the difference between 1 and 3, yes, it's total variance. Okay? Total variance. 54,600, again 54,600 minus what? 62,500. 54 minus 62, so the difference will be negative. Negative 7,900. Negative will be F. Don't forget, I will check my answer. The total variance has 2 reasons. The first one is spending, and the second, efficiency. So the total of spending and efficiency against the total of these amounts must equal total variance. Again, must equal total variance. This is how to prepare and how to calculate and how to analyze the variable overhead analysis or variance analysis. The second is equations and how to calculate the variances using equations. The same equations like direct labor, but instead of rate, I will speak about spending here. Spending. This is my same information, the same calculation, don't forget them. This is my table. In equations, firstly, I will calculate total variance. How to calculate total variance? Actual cost minus standard cost. From my point of view, your problem is how to calculate these amounts correctly. The rest is very simple. It's applying. Okay? Here I have a total variance 7,900 favorable. What are the reasons? 2 reasons. This is my table. What is the first one? Efficiency. What is the equation of efficiency? Actual hours minus standard hours times standard rate. Actual hours, standard hours times standard rate. Here I have positive, means I'm favorable, 2,500. The second, yes, spending. Spending, difference between rates. Actual rate, again, actual rate, standard rate, times actual hours. Again, times actual hours. Here I have negative means favorable, 10,400. Don't forget, my total variance must equal what? Efficiency and spending. My total variance in previous slide, if you remember, this is my total variance, 7,900 favorable, and the total of the 2 variances will equal the same total variance. I explained why I have this total variance. The same result for variable overhead, the same results, regardless you prepare performance report or you prepare equations, okay? I have limited time to record my lecture, so I will finish my lecture today only for how to analyze variable manufacturing overhead. شكرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.